Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about transit Pluto, square opposition, or inconjunct one's natal Neptune. Now, when we're talking about transits that involve Pluto, they can be about power, control, transformation, crisis, desire, even fixation and obsession. Now, when you have a transit Pluto, basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal Neptune. Well, I'm going to elaborate on that. When I say basically adverse aspect, of course, squares and oppositions in astrology, those are adverse and negative aspects. Now, the inconjunct, though it's neutral, neutral aspects can have good and bad qualities in them, coupled with the fact that an inconjunct aspect can often require an adjustment or a transition. And those things, of course, can cause some exasperation and tension. So collectively, basically, I do see this as an adverse transit. Now, anyway, going back to transit Pluto, basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal Neptune, well, it may manifest in power, control, transformation, crisis, desire, obsession, fixation. Those things might conflict with your dreams. It could simply be that you're overly obsessed or fixated on attaining some kind of dream or fantasy, or you're dealing with some crisis in your life that may be conflicting with attaining those things, attaining what you're dreaming about, what you're fantasizing about. Natal Neptune is in Scorpio, say. It could be doing something with the occult, which includes astrology, or law enforcement, forensics, working as a coroner or a surgeon, investigation as some examples. Another thing is that Neptune is connected with our ideals, and what you want, what you want as far as your ideals go, whether it may be a home or some business. I mean, if natal Neptune is in Capricorn and or the 10th house, it could be something business related, career related in general, attaining ambitions. This could be where you might be dealing, with some power struggles, or it could be a situation where you're dealing with some adversity or some crisis that comes up, or even a death that you've had to cope with. May conflict with you attaining those ideals and focusing on them at this time. You may, at this time as well, keep in mind you're talking about Neptune's connected with desire. And Pluto's connected with desire and emotional intensity, and Neptune is about inspiration. So it may be harder for you to really be inspired to do things perhaps that you desire at this time, or it could be something Pluto related, such as having inspiration to do something Pluto related, such as dealing with a crisis, or a death, or taxes, or insurance. As some examples. And another thing too is that Pluto again is connected with obsession and fixation, and Neptune is associated with deception and duplicity. So I wouldn't let something like that obsess over some situation where you may have been deceived, or you succumb to some kind of fraud, because this could be a time where you might be dominated, whether it's in your mind, as far as the situation, as far as that goes. You might be. It's very hard, maybe perhaps at this time, to control people that are being deceptive and duplicitous. If there's some situation where you're dealing with somebody that's like that, the best thing to do is just to extricate yourself from that situation, I would say. It could be some situation too, looking at Neptune. Neptune is associated with what's unclear and nebulous. You may be obsessing over something to you that might be unclear and nebulous. If the transit Pluto stays in the 3rd house, it could be a sibling or a cousin or a neighbor. Maybe you're trying to figure these people out. It can be somewhat of maybe some kind of mystery or conundrum at this time. It might be a situation where Pluto is also transformation, and Neptune can be connected with less fortune, such as the homeless, the impoverished, the hungry, be oppressed. If you're trying to, do anything to empower anybody that's in this situation or transform their lives, it might be more difficult at this time. Keep in mind, this is basically an adverse transit. And also, too, Neptune is associated with dissipation, dissolving. And it might be harder, to dissolve an issue, where it might be it could be a power struggle. It could be trying, issue over control of something. If you have the transit Pluto, in the 5th house, it could be over a child situation, might be child custody, as an example. This is something too where, anatomically speaking, Neptune is connected with the feet, the toes, the lymphatic and immune system. So it may be at this time where those issues might be harder to get power over or control, or you might be obsessing over some issue with this at this time. Maybe you don't have that desire to deal with these issues right now if you're currently going through them. It could be a situation where maybe you're trying to get the support, maybe alone, to deal with these things. Pluto can be connected with support, whether it's moral, emotional, monetary. I would say loans as well, fall in this, as far as what Pluto's associated with. And another thing too is that if there's anyone out here that's dealing, with a drug or alcohol addiction or problem, it might be harder to get that under control at this time, and guard against being fixated or obsessed over these issues, because it may indicate being obsessed with the drinking, with drugs at this time, or if you're trying to gain power over it, it can be harder to do so, and it could be best just to try to call out for someone. If you can, though, of course, this transit could make that difficult because Pluto is connected with support, and you might feel that it's harder to get that support at this time if you're in that situation and you're dealing with one of those things I just described. Now, another thing too is that Neptune is associated with isolation, confinement, and it might be a time, where, if you're dealing with a death at this time, or maybe a figurative ending, obliteration of something. Maybe this is causing, increased isolation, or maybe you're figuratively speaking, it's harder for you to isolate yourself, from the issue, from this problem of whether it might be dominating your thoughts. If you did experience a death during this time, this transit, it can be, a situation too. Neptune is also connected with incarceration and imprisonment. So it might be, a time, where you're talking about, Pluto is associated, with crime. And, the thing is, this can be a time if somebody is involved, if you know somebody that has this transit, and they are involved, in some criminal activity, it can be, harder, to escape perhaps the consequences of that crime. Neptune is connected with escapism, and you look at this, so Pluto is associated with investigation. So it might be harder to escape those people, investigators, at this time. And the thing is, another way, Neptune is associated with lethargy and sleep. So you might be dealing, it might be some issue, with a death or figurative ending of something, a crisis that you may be going through, a power struggle, upheavals. These things might be conflicting with your sleep and ability to relax at this time. Now, Neptune is also connected with the metaphysical, which includes astrology, and guard against becoming overly obsessed and fixated over this. And if you're involved in astrology or anything else with the metaphysical, or anything for that matter, subjects connected with Neptune, which can include poetry, dancing, photography, illusion, even pharmaceutical work, boating, anything that can be related or connected with Neptune. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, now another way this transit may manifest is you may be overly obsessed with your dreams at this time. If natal Neptune is in Sagittarius, as an example, it could be doing something with sports or exploration or translation, something with horses, adventure, um, publishing, advertising, as some examples. Now, also too, if you're dealing with a crisis, it may challenge your ideals at this time. If Neptune, say, natal Neptune is in the fourth house, as an example, it could be some of your ideals may be connected with a home, a family, safety and security at this time. Following your traditions. It can also be a time too during this transit where power struggles may make it more difficult for you to relax at this time. Say if transit Pluto is in the 10th house, as an example, it could be a power struggle with the dominant parent, which is often the father. It could be authority figures, older people at this time. And also too, if there's any issues with the colon, the prostate, or the bladder, those body parts are connected with Pluto. Those things may challenge matters with self-sacrificing at this time. Say, for example, if the natal Neptune is in Aquarius, it could be self-sacrificing with friendships, or doing something with computers to help somebody out, or even tech labs, bringing them in, for less fortunate, such as children that are in inner city schools, or that maybe don't have the funds available to have these things. And also, too, another way this transit may be expressed is that a death may cause some difficulty, perhaps, or in really at this time, just in general doing Neptunian things, you could say, such as, if you're dealing with a death, it could be difficulty doing things connected with altruism, or again, poetry, dancing, or photography as some examples. Now, surgery, if this does take place at this time with you, surgery may cause more lethargy than usual, weakness. Neptune can be connected with lethargy and weakness. And if the transit Pluto is in the 5th house, as an example, it may be surgery on the heart as an example. But anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.